One of the questions I often hear is, why did you select Lowell to build this wind farm? And I'd like to report back, in fact, actually it was Lowell who selected us. More specifically, it was a property owner that owns about 2,000 acres here who was interested in doing a wind farm for some time. There was another company that actually started the process of planning for a project, but for whatever reason that fell through. And then the property owner himself was looking at maybe doing it himself, and then after a short time realized that was not such a great idea. So he then approached us, and then we started talking about it internally at Green Mountain Power, if this is something we want to take on. But what's critical for us is that the people of Lowell accepted this project and welcomed it. And we first met with the select board in Lowell. It was in early 2009. And I remember at that meeting and talking about the project. And again, we were still exploring whether we even wanted to do this. And we talked to the select board about what their thoughts were. And they were receptive to the idea, but they said that they wanted the project to be voted on by the townspeople of Lowell. And that would be in 2010. And we said, great, that was wonderful. We appreciated that because, frankly, if the town didn't want it, we weren't going to build it. I mean, it's just the right thing to do out of respect for the town, we felt. And frankly, it just makes good business sense. You don't want to be somewhere where you don't want it, where you're not wanted. But what that did for us, it gave us over a year to actually engage the community. And that's kind of what I led. And it really was about getting information out to the people of Lowell, but also all the surrounding communities as well. We met with all the select boards in all the surrounding towns. We met with the planning commissions, with the regional development authorities, anybody that had any kind of presence or interest in what was happening regarding development, including key business people. We met with them in advance, got their ideas, thoughts, concerns about a wind project in Lowell, and provided them with information, and continually kept them updated and abreast of what was happening, in particular with Lowell in our decision-making process, because we didn't come into Lowell and say, we're going to build a wind farm. We came in and said, we're thinking about this. We have a lot to understand and learn about the process itself, and we want to bring you along with us in our decision-making process. We held, in the town, quite a number of meetings with residents, a lot in living rooms, people's homes. We got people just together to meet, to ask questions, and for us to respond to those questions. There were a number of large townwide meetings, one that we sponsored, one sponsored by the select board, and then another one sponsored by concerned citizens. And in all those, it was an opportunity for us to talk with the people of Lowell. And in the end, we actually even went door to door to both GMP and Vermont Electric Co-op. I should have said, this really is a project, a joint effort between Vermont Electric Co-op and Green Mountain Power. And together, we made sure that we touched every single resident in the town of Lowell to make sure that they had the information they needed to make an informed decision about the vote that they were taking in town meeting today. And that really was the premise of us. We never went in and said, we think this is the best thing since sliced bread and we want you to vote for it. We never said that. What we said was, here's the information, this is what we know. When you make a vote, we just want to make sure you base it on having sound information. And that's what we did. We made sure that there was a lot of, particularly because there was a developer here before, there was a lot of misconceptions, misinformation about what a development like this would mean to the town. And we had to make sure that people had the facts about it. And that's what we spent over a year to do. And that to me is what's critical for any town, that there is ample time for all parties, for and against a project like this, to be able to have their opportunity to educate, talk with town folks. So in the end, the town really is heard from all sides of an issue and then can make an informed decision. And that's what drove us, and that's what we did. You may know in the end, the town voted 75% in favor of this project. It was the largest voter turnout in the history of this town, largest number and larger overall voter turnout. So it was a great process, we thought. And the public engagement was critical for the success of that.
Did that process inform the design of the actual project and any of the mitigating factors that you then took to the permitting phase?
Here's an example. Yes, it did. And a good example would be the Good Neighbor Fund. So we were the first to suggest a Good Neighbor Fund, which was basically to share some of the economic value with the surrounding towns. That came out of, particularly it was a meeting in Albany, where a number of people stood up in Albany and said, wait a second, Lowell gets all the money, we don't get anything, what's that about? We had talked about a Good Neighbor Fund internally, and we weren't all on the same page about it. After hearing that, I went back to Green Mountain Power and said, listen, this is one of the concerns that we've heard. We need to figure out a way to do it. And actually, I was the one who figured out the formula on how to provide some of that economic value to the 5 surrounding towns. Another example was the lights. I mean, that was something we heard from a lot of people in neighboring towns. They don't want to have to see these red lights. We then started an investigation, and Charlie led this, to figure out how we can address that. And what we did find was there is a system out there that actually only turns the lights on when there's something flying in the vicinity. It's called OCAS system, and he can tell you what it actually stands for. And we have that as part. We in our CPG we said we would do this. We're just waiting now for FAA approval in order to be able to install the equipment. But we're prepared to do that. That was another example of hearing something from the community and mitigating it in what we decided to do here. I'm sure there are many other examples that Charlie can speak to. That was kind of the, I mean, big picture, as you'll know, there's 21 turbines. It's a 63 megawatt plant. Each turbine is 3 megawatts, which is, it's one of the largest for a inland.
Yep, it's about the biggest land-based turbines there are. These are the biggest land-based turbines installed in the U.S. right now, the rotors we have. Vestas turbines, yep. Vestas. They're 84-meter towers, and it's a 112-meter rotor. So it's 459 feet plus or minus a few inches to the tip of the blade when it's all the way to the top.
The total acreage that was impacted on the top of this mountain is 135 acres. The roads themselves are about 90 acres, and then the rest are, I guess, turbine pads and whatever, but in total, 135.
Well, the roads are smaller than that. I mean, the permanent impervious surface, if you will, the roads, about 27 acres. So that's what's left here in terms of the access road that takes you up, and then the road along the ridge line.
Oh, good. Okay, even better. So there was a lot of.
But you cleared more than that.
Correct. 135 acres is essentially the amount of land that was cleared and in some cases graded or worked on. So yeah.
And then once the revegetation is allowed, how much of a footprint will we leave? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't know, Charlie. I think that's in the 80 to 90 acre range, because there were quite a few areas that had to be temporarily cleared, and there's a whole revegetation plan for slopes. I don't know that exact number, but I'm thinking it's in the 80 to 90 acre range. I don't have that
Very
exact.
impervious, it's probably a little less than 80, but it's in that range. What would be left is sort of open.
So some of the impacts that we had, 135 acres, of that 20.7 acres was bear habitat, based on the number of bear scar beech trees that were there. There was a half an acre of wetlands that was impacted, and 0.1 acres of high elevation wetlands that was impacted. So obviously this had an impact. So there's nothing we could have done. We've done everything we could to avoid wetlands. So in those areas that we actually impacted, we had to mitigate. And the way we mitigate is by conserving land to set aside for the impact we had. So for the 135 acres, for the half an acre of wetlands and 0.1 acres of high elevation wetlands, we've conserved 2,800 acres of land. 1,100 acres is on the mountain itself. All but 280 is conserved in perpetuity, so there could be no development. When we're done with this project or subsequent projects that require a CPG, there could be no development on top of this mountain. And that was a real concern for the Agency of Natural Resources, because they were fearful that, you have a road now up, and how long before there are big homes and houses, and they didn't want that, so it's conserved in perpetuity, so there can't be any development of that type of development moving forward. In addition to the 1,100 acres here, we conserved 1,700 acres in the town of Eden, which is an important wildlife corridor between the Green River Reservoir Natural Habitat Block and the Lowell Mountain Habitat Block. I'm not sure if I'm saying it exactly right, but It's an important corridor. It was pieces of land that A&R apparently had their eyes on for some time, and this was the perfect opportunity for them to get something for wildlife
Fair
of the
enough,
state.
yeah. Opportunistic feeders.
Yeah, it's great. And so for the impact that we had, we get to conserve, 2,800 acres. And there's also 110 acres on a mountaintop somewhere as well as part of Vermont Green Mountain Club. So important habitat being conserved as a result in perpetuity for the impact we're having.
Now, was that for the Class A1 headwaters that were impacted?
Well, the mitigation included the waters. There were some A1 areas that were part of the impact calculation that was unavoidable. So that mitigation included what was required for those areas.
And that was for the Clean Water Act and all that?
It was, well, yes, because part of the permitting requirement is Section 404 permit, which is the Army Corps permit, and that is under the Clean Water Act. And so the Army Corps regulates impacts to wetlands and streams and other waters of the U.S. And so part of the mitigation, not the whole 2,800 acres, but part of the mitigation, lands that were set aside were as required by the Army Corps for that purpose.
So why don't you take it over, put it over, right?
Sure. So again, my name's Jeff Nelson. I'm with DHB, and I've been working around Vermont for 25 years or so on water resources related work. We do a lot of work with the ski industry on high elevation development, ski trails and lifts, and other work along those lines. And we became involved in this project back in 2009 for GMP, and the very first thing that we did was did a very comprehensive assessment of all of the natural resource features. So really looking at all the wetlands, the streams, high elevation, Class A waters, wildlife habitat, rare plants, and really developed a very comprehensive assemblage. And this map is a little hard to see from far away, but you're welcome to take a look at it further. But basically, this map shows in great detail all of the different features that we located, the wetlands, streams, and all of the other natural resource features. And then, that really kicked off an interactive process between ourselves, GMP, the design engineers, which was Krebs and Lansing out of Colchester, and the regulators to really look hard at how a project could be constructed here while at the same time minimizing impacts to natural resources. And there were several iterations of that process whereby there were options to move a turbine, avoid a certain wetland, avoid a certain area of habitat on the ridgeline, and that process went on for, seemed like forever, but it was a couple of years, it seemed like. It was quite an extensive process, and at the same time, GMP was gathering wind data, and so there was microsighting that was being done of the turbine locations based on how the wind data was coming back, so that was feeding into this process as well. So in the end, as Robert mentioned, we were able to really minimize the amount of impact to wetlands and streams as a result of this project. I mean, given the magnitude of the project, which is the 135 acres of clearing and earth disturbance, the fact that we had less than a half an acre of wetland impact, and of that, it was less than a tenth of an acre of Class 2 wetland, which are the significant wetlands under the Vermont wetland rules, is actually pretty remarkable given the magnitude of the project. So, that was a big piece of the work that we did, was really figuring out how we could avoid resources, and then working with the agencies, both A&R and the Army Corps, on the permitting process, looking at alternatives, and looking at mitigation and the whole process through there. The other piece that was a major part of our work with respect to the project was stormwater management. And this map shows in the different colors the watersheds that the project is located within. So along the ridgeline, which is here, is the drainage divide between lands that drain into the Missisquoi Basin on the right side of the drawing, and lands that drain to the Black River and ultimately to Lake Memphremagog on the left side of the ridge, or the left side of the page. And so part of our mapping was obviously really zoomed out on a map like this, but then also very zoomed in looking at how the project would change the natural drainage patterns on the mountain and what would be done to manage stormwater runoff. And when we talk about managing stormwater runoff, we really talk about that in two parts. The first part is during construction. During the time period that earth is being moved and that the project is being constructed, you probably think of that more as an erosion control type situation, and that is what we refer to as the construction stormwater phase. And so that there's a series of practices that are followed, and there's a very strict permitting regime that A&R administers with inspections and monitoring and reporting to essentially manage the construction stormwater phase of the work. And then as the construction completes, we shift to what's called operational phase stormwater management, and this is a program that Vermont DEC administers. The construction stormwater program is actually a federal program that's delegated to Vermont DEC. The operational phase, meaning how stormwater is managed once a project like this is built, is actually a product of state law, 10 VSA 1264 if you're interested. And that program regulates how the stormwater is treated, meaning how pollutants are removed from stormwater, and also how it's controlled, meaning what's being done for stormwater runoff to manage the peak rate of flow. So that if you have an impervious surface, a road, driveway, rooftop, making sure that water is slowed down essentially so that it doesn't affect the receiving streams. So as you might imagine, managing stormwater along a 3-mile ridge line is considerably different than managing stormwater from a parking lot for a Lowe's Home Center in South Burlington. This project, there were a number of different things that really had to go into the planning and design of the stormwater system. A key one of which was really minimizing the overall footprint of the project, because it was a lot of the feedback that we got from the regulators was you really need to do everything you possibly can to shrink the footprint of the project, avoid cutting more trees than you need to, avoid impacting more wetlands and more streams than you need to. And that extended not only to the way the roads and the turbine pads and the other features were designed, but also how the stormwater systems were designed. And so we worked with A&R to develop what's called an alternative design system that involves the use of what are called level spreaders. And I understand the commission visited the Sheffield wind site earlier today, which we were also involved in the permitting and design of. That site was built with what I would call more traditional stormwater BMPs, which are big ponds. And big ponds are part of what's in the stormwater manual as what's called an acceptable stormwater treatment practice. The problem with big ponds is that they're big. And when you're talking about a ridge line, an area of sensitive natural communities and areas that you want to minimize the footprint of a project, if you do all your stormwater management with ponds, it takes up a lot of space. It causes a lot of additional earth disturbance and clearing. For this project, as an example, we've estimated that had GMP gone with traditional pond designs, there would have been approximately 12, maybe even more, acres of additional clearing and grading. So it would have added 10% to the amount of disturbance and clearing that was associated with the project. And some might say, well, 10 acres, that's really not all that much. But when we were going through the permit process for the project, it was really to the level of tenths of acres. And really the agencies were pushing really hard for GMP to shrink the footprint of the project up as much as possible to minimize the impact on the natural environment, so that just adding 10 more acres would have been a lot. It would have been a lot more change in the natural system. So the system that we use, and I have a couple of pictures that I'll show you because you're not going to see too much in terms of the stormwater infrastructure today with everything covered with snow. But the level spreaders are a much more what I would call decentralized way of managing the stormwater. So we have this 27 and a half acres of impervious surface, which consists of the access road from Route 100 up to the ridge line, and we're sort of in the middle of that now at this building, and then the 3 miles of what's called crane path along the ridge line. So that comprises the impervious surface associated with the project. So what we did with the stormwater design was basically try to take those areas of impervious surface and split up the areas where that runoff would go into the smallest possible pieces, so that rather than collecting all the stormwater runoff from very large areas and sending it to a large stormwater treatment facility which discharges to one place, we tried to break it up into smaller pieces so that we could more closely mimic the natural hydrology or the natural water movement on the mountain. So that, and again, it's hard to see from where you're standing, but this map shows all those little locations where we have these level spreaders, or in some cases we actually used ponds where level spreaders couldn't work because of the circumstances of particular locations. We ended up with 31 level spreaders and 16 ponds. So they are handling, each one of these facilities is handling a very small amount of impervious area. Some of them are only handling about 1/10 of an acre. So, not much more than the impervious surface associated with a typical residential house and driveway going to its own special stormwater treatment system. The benefit of that, in our minds, is that it really it distributes the water in a way that's more characteristic of the natural condition, that the water is spread out, it goes to locations closer to where it does under natural conditions, and it provides, we think, a much greater factor of safety in terms of these systems being able to reliably operate without relying on a few very large features. So I'm going to wrap up. I want to show you a couple pictures. I guess the 2 other points I wanted to make about the stormwater are that in addition to going through the whole design and permitting process, there is an ongoing monitoring requirement for the actual level spreaders to assess, because it's an alternative design, to assess their ongoing performance for a period of several years to make sure that they're actually doing what they are designed to do. And then secondly, as part of the sort of bigger picture evaluation of how is this project affecting water resources in the vicinity, there is a second water quality monitoring plan that captures each of the watersheds that drain off the mountain, and that monitoring is ongoing under what's called the water quality certification that ANR issued, that basically involves monitoring the biology, the chemistry, and physical conditions of all these streams to evaluate whether or not the project has had or will have any impact on that. That's something that is not required of most projects. It's above and beyond, and it was something that the agency wanted as they issued the 401 or the water quality certification for the project. And that actually ties back to Sheffield, where you went earlier, and I don't know if it was mentioned, but the agency, ANR, has been continuing to do biological monitoring of those streams. We just recently saw the most recent data collected from the fall of 2012, which showed in the 6 or 7 streams surrounding that project that the streams all are
We heard they're all
fully
green
meeting.
dots.
All green.
All
Huh?
green dots.
All green dots,
That's what we
exactly.
heard.
Yeah,
But
okay.
you're monitoring right on the mountain, is that what you're saying?
There are 2, in this case, there are 2
The
types
first
of
step,
monitoring.
yeah.
Right, that monitoring associated with the level spreaders is right at the devices. And then the watershed-wide monitoring captures everything, which is basically further out, where you would see the entire effect of any activities or impacts associated with the mountain development. So before I lose you, I just want to show
Well,
a couple
what
of
I'm going to do
pictures.
is, because I want to just have them see, Charlie, can you show the slide?
Yeah, sure.
You want to set that up?
Yep.
And so 5 more minutes, we'll have you out of here, but
I do have a question for
Yeah,
Jeff too
good.
after he shows us his picture.
So I just have 3 sets of these. I don't know how you want to.
That's right.
Okay. So These are just, since you're not going to see much stormwater today, these are 3 pictures of one of the 31 level spreaders on the site. And so the first picture there essentially shows the level spreader itself, how the stormwater comes in, and there's a lip where the water goes over during a storm event and then flows out. And then the next 2 pictures are the grassed and wooded areas on the downhill side of the level spreaders. And essentially what these devices do is basically take a concentrated stream of runoff, they spread it out across the slope, and they take advantage of the natural infiltrative capability of the soils and the vegetation downslope of those areas. And I mentioned before that we didn't use all level spreaders because we really needed to put the level spreaders in areas where the soils, the slopes, the distance to streams or wetlands was suitable to be able to take advantage of that natural dispersion capability. And the monitoring plan that's required by the stormwater permit will have us looking at how these are actually performing over time now that they're constructed.
So these are actually like huge water bars.
Yeah, you could think of them that way. I mean, the water doesn't flow out, it flows into them through a stone-lined swale off of the road, and then it basically, it sort of stops. And then at that point, as the level inside behind the
And then it
spreader,
overflows.
it'll overflow over the length of it.
How frequently do you observe these? Because to me, it looks like it's silting up right away.
Sure. The level spreaders during the construction of the project were used as sediment traps. And so all the pictures that we have from last year were while the construction was still going on. And so as part of the construction completion projects, all the level spreaders get checked, and if they need to get cleaned out, they do. But the expectation is that once construction is done, which will be finishing up this spring, that the amount of sediment will be greatly reduced because you don't have all that heavy truck traffic up and down the mountain, stirring up the road and all that. So there was a lot more sediment during construction, and that we specifically use these as part of our construction stormwater management plan for that very reason.
I have a general question.
I've got,
Wait.
I'm sorry.
yeah, can I?
Did you say that?
Yeah, I did, thanks.
Go ahead.
I got a couple of questions that will relate to each other. So Bob, clarify again for me, Robert, excuse me. When did you start talking to the community?
2009, or January of 2009 was the first meeting we had with the select board.
And when did you make your actual filing for your CPG?
We filed our CPG in May 2000.
May 21st, 2010.
2010.
And so your first conversation was 2010?
You know the time of day?
2009?
I do, it was-
2009.
So you totally were in advance of the 45-day requirement. You know what we're hearing from some communities is a real concern about, the requirement for the 248 is a 45-day filing, official thing. So I wanted to get a sense of when you started having conversations, so they started to know that something was going on.
Yeah.
So, and then can I ask though, when did you start talking to A&R? When did you file with A&R or start talking to A&R about these other technical permits you needed?
Well, it was really,
November of 2008 was the first time we were here on site with
Yeah.
A&R.
yeah.
We came up in the fall with A&R,
Yep.
had a site tour with A&R, Army Corps,
Yep.
Fish and Wildlife. It was, I don't know, it was 20 of streams,
Right.
guys were here.
Yep.
It was about 20 people up here for
Yep.
a tour as
So-
to look at the mountain and just start to
Right.
talk about what kinds of things we would have to start to address
Right.
if we were planning to.
And then
to
our
create a
initial,
permit.
we really didn't get going on the data collection until 2009 when we had, during the growing season is when we do all the wetland studies and so forth. So, but yeah, that's right. I remember that.
But I'm wondering, Andy, I know the first formal meeting with the select board was in January. Did we have conversations in 2008?
I don't think we did much with the select board. I might have,
Okay.
because I was kind of out ahead of you guys anyways, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Can I address that? Though I'm from Wyndham, and Wyndham, our select board, one of the group wanting to build wind towers came and met with them privately in May. And then in June, a letter was written by Meadows End to how it goes, the adjoiners, which we are 200 yards away, we're not, so we didn't get the letter. So the adjoiners towns got notified with letter, I think it was dated June 28th, which came in after the 4th of July, when everybody's on vacation. And we had a town meeting right as soon as we could. in Wyndham. And still you had to, if you were gonna get involved, you had to hire a lawyer. That 45 days shrunk
Yeah.
really quick.
Yeah, no, I know, but so really, you were in conversation for a lot longer than,
Well over a year, 15, 16 months before
Yeah,
we
so-
filed the CPG.
Right.
January and May, almost a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we filed 2 CPGs on this project. We filed a CPG in when do we filed that in September or August of 2009 for the Met Towers.
Yeah.
So we filed a CPG for the Met Towers because we put up, there was
Yeah.
wind information. That was one of the reasons we
Right.
got involved in this property was there was already 5 years worth of wind data here because of the previous developer that had been looking at the property. So we had that, but that was all 50-meter wind data. And the turbines are at 80 meters, or 84 in our case. So the engineers estimate that, but if they're wrong, that's a big deal. So we wanted to make sure that we had good wind and that the extrapolation from 50 meters to 80 was accurate. So we put up 3 Met towers on the mountain to verify that, 2 80-meter towers at either end and another 50-meter tower back in the middle where the previous 50-meter had been. And we filed that in the summer of 2000, it was sometime in 2009, I don't remember the exact date we filed it. But they then, as a condition of our CPG, we had to wait till the town voted on town meeting day that March. It would have been the first Tuesday of March, right?
That's right.
That's town meeting day. Before we could start construction of the Met Tower. And
Okay,
that was
so
in the
the-
spring of 2009 when the town
So
spring of 2010 when the town voted on the project.
so 246 for the Met Towers has the same 45-day,
248. There's two 248s. There's a 248J, which is what a lot of people do for us.
That was the Met Tower.
The Met Tower.
For Jay.
Right. Now, we didn't,
it's, okay, so now it's something else. Now it's
there
246.
was a 248J.
Yeah, but now it's now it's 246 for a Met Tower.
Right, but we didn't do a 248J because we were doing the 80-meter towers, which were required to be lit with FAA lights.
Yeah.
So Public Service Board made us do a full 248 application
Well, what I'm-
and go through
What I'm
it's
hearing is now
substantially
is-
more.
Yeah, but it takes us long to get a 248J determination, I'm hearing, as it does to get a 248.
I don't know, it took us a long time to get the Met Tower 248, I can assure you that. It was a lot of work.
Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'll then have.
No, are you-
I may
you
have
have
some more.
another
No, go ahead, go
Okay.
ahead.
So my understanding from looking at your application was that you agreed on a 3,200-foot setback for homes and residences from the towers, so that I
No.
read the order,
Th-
the final
there's
order.
no-
There's only one home within like.
The nearest home is about
3,000.
3,500 feet away
Yeah,
from Turbine
right.
1. We didn't have a setback specifically. That's just as close as the nearest home is to our closest turbine.
Did that have to do with how you set up the turbines on the hill to try to keep them away from having an effect on the town?
No, that's just sort of the way that the property laid out in Lowell. So our distance from that closest home, that was a feature we liked because the further away you are, the less
Oh.
chance there is to create problems for folks. But for us, it was a natural, that's where the property that we're working with ended, and then
Okay.
the next home is 3,200 feet away, 3,500 feet away. It wasn't something that we set out to plan.
Yeah, and
We didn't plan it that way.
In the town
That's
of
the
Wyndham, we're a
question.
quarter mile from the boundary, the actual town. So it's a lot more proximity, possibility of impacting a great many homeowners.
So,
But your Public Service Board application said that you'd agreed to a 3,200-foot distance. That was one of the things that was specified. It's in the records, Public Service Board records.
I'd love to see that because I'm pretty familiar with the
Okay.
1,100 odd pages that we filed and read it.
Well, it sounds like
But
semantics.
yeah, we could verify that. I'm pretty sure we didn't
Yeah.
say there was a specific setback
I mean,
for
you
it.
did more than 3,200, you did
Right.
3,500.
Right.
But it was one of the things that.
Yeah, I'll have to check
you
that.
put in your
I don't
application.
remember that. I
well,
don't remember
that
that
may
bit
be
of
just the
testimony.
distance from you said,
Yeah.
from the land that you
What it
control.
was.
Yeah,
That's
it's
the
just,
nearest house.
Yeah.
Distance to the nearest house.
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a substantial amount.
So
It is, yeah.
Go ahead.
can I ask one question, Jeff, and or Robert or whoever knows? So one of the things that we've seen at just about every meeting we've had is the picture of Lowell under construction. And I know maybe for you, Jeff, construction sites are beautiful things to behold. But for most, I'm an engineer by training and I've lived in a lot of construction sites. So they're challenging sites in the middle of construction. So what I'm interested in, because what I haven't been able to get from anybody, is what happens after. So, you've got your things that kind of look like the Egyptian pyramids for your bases, do they all look like just rock forever?
No, it's good.
How wide are the roads at the end? How much can the tree lines eventually encroach back in, and where do you have to stop that? If you could paint a picture for us,
Sure.
you got a blank canvas here.
Yeah.
Paint a picture for us of what does it look like in 5, 10, 15 years?
Yep.
Great
Well,
question.
this
Great.
project, it did something very innovative, and it was really through the consultation process with A&R. The agency staff were really concerned about doing anything that was possible to shrink the footprint of the project on the ridgeline over time, and recognizing there's a certain amount of area that was going to have to be disturbed to build it. And so what we ended up doing was developing a revegetation plan for the rock fill slopes. And what that involved was that during construction, all of the grubbings, the root material, and topsoil that could be saved was saved and stockpiled, and then that was broadcast over the top of these rock fill slopes. And then, there's a lot of obviously vegetative material in there, and live seeds and things that are able to grow back. And so basically, this revegetation plan covers all those areas of the rock fill slopes. Now, it's kind of funny in one instance, because the whole objective of the construction stormwater program is to stabilize surfaces and to not have exposed soil. So we had all these, depending on one's point of view, very nicely stabilized rock surfaces that GMP and the contractors had to go then and put all this unstabilized soil back on, but the objective of that is exactly what you talked about, really shrinking that up. And
So that should regrow vegetation.
that's right,
is the
and
idea?
that happened last summer, and even, I made a site visit here in late September, and specifically made a point of looking at some of those areas where this material had been broadcast, and I could already see little seedlings coming up, and ferns growing, and a lot of native regrowth already starting after just a few months of a pretty dry summer. And so, this is something, again, as part of there's a revegetation monitoring plan that is being implemented to see how these areas do. There may need to be supplemental seeding or planting that may have to be done in some of these areas, but the whole idea of that, and it's escaping me, and I don't know, Charlie, if you know the number of acres subject to that, it's in the 25-acre
Yeah, something like
range,
that,
I
yeah.
think, so it's a considerable amount.
And how much can come back in towards the road? I mean, you've got
Well, this
stormwater-
goes right up to the edge of the road. So this is from the bottom of the fill slope where you go to the existing forest, all the way up to the edge
Yeah,
of
now
the
get
road.
away from the paths. I'm thinking about the general crane paths, you
Right.
call them, and
Right.
the other access roads. Do those stay always as wide as they are, or can they come back in some? And at least, certainly they're at least vegetated,
Yeah.
except for the travel surface.
The road going up is 18 feet, that will stay 18 feet. Top of the mountain, the road up there is 34 feet,
Yeah.
and that'll stay 34 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll be able to grow everything back up into
Right.
that border.
And the
But it
size
goes,
of the pyramid.
but it goes 34 feet because it's the cranes.
That's right.
To allow the crane to move back and
Yeah,
forth
we need to
across
bring
the
the
road.
range back for
Right.
whatever
The
reason.
size of the pyramids are,
Oh,
going to remain there forever.
Right, although they're not going to remain
That's what
gray.
we call
They're
it,
going
just so that you know.
Yeah, they're not going to remain gray. They'll turn green and and revegetate. That's the plan. And this is the first project in Vermont that requirement has been. Well, I don't even know if it's a requirement. We agreed to it. We negotiated with A&R, talked through the project and how to minimize impacts, and that was part of ultimately what the agency agreed to in terms of appropriate mitigative measures associated with the project. So.
So, say that again, I'm confused. The side of the pyramid will regrow into vegetation?
Right, the fill slope on the downhill side. Those are areas that are part of the revegetation plan where this material has been broadcast. And some of them haven't done much yet because the construction was going on late into the fall. But the ones that I looked at that I was talking about were the ones that had been done earlier in the season last year, where I was already, even after a few months, seeing stuff starting to grow. So all those fill slopes are part of that plan for this project. And I expect that will be the precedent for future projects going forward, because now that someone's demonstrated that it can be done, I think that the agency will say, well, why don't you do it on the next project?
So it's 18 feet and 34 because these are bigger towers? Because Sheffield is 16 feet, the road up. They said was 16 feet.
Yep.
Just tower,
Well, 16 feet leads itself to some issues with construction traffic. You can't get two rock trucks to pass each other on the road. So there's all little kinds of things that people figure out as you build stuff, and sometimes what we did here was very careful to make sure that all of this, as Jeff said, it was a collaboration with his firm, the agency, Krebs and Lansing, GMP, and our contractor, making sure that whatever we agreed to with A&R that would work to satisfy their needs was still easily constructible. So we were very focused on things like maintaining the road width so that it worked well for us for construction.
Yeah, and I can see here the different configuration because you've got sort of one road.
We do.
Right.
You have to
And
be able
they've
to go
got-
two directions.
Yeah, and
really.
they've got places to go out and around,
Right.
but just
And-
because of the
So-
design.
There's also a difference in the
Let me just follow up on
Yeah,
one
please.
thing related to that point, because in terms of a natural resource protection component of that, one of the things about having the roads designed as they were for this traffic was that allowed the duration of construction to be minimized, because in addition to the amount of area, one of the things we were really working hard on during the planning was how can we minimize the duration of time that the soil is open, that the site is disturbed, really cut that down. And by having the ability to have, and the trucks were going both ways on that road, I was here many of those days. So that really was helpful, because as long as that soil is open, exposed to rainfall, exposed to runoff, that's a risk. And we
Yeah.
wanted to minimize
Yeah.
the risk by getting it done fast.
So if I, just one
ahead.
last follow-up on this, Janet. So if I think about those aerial photographs that we see all the time, if I'm hearing you right, in a future state, clearly the road ribbons will be visible.
That's right.
Because they'll be impervious, of course, the towers. And most everything else will be vegetated, everything will be vegetated. And the question of, the part that's harder to know is how much the base pads will kind of blend into the setting, or even though they're vegetated, be as discernible. They certainly won't be as discernible as they were
During
in the construction period.
Right, exactly.
If you have a sense of how much they may blend, and that's really
Yeah.
speculative, so it's probably
Yeah.
unfair, but they'll at
Right.
least blend in some.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there was not, this project, just to be clear, the turbine pads are composed of very coarse blasted rock, and the intent there is that the runoff will seep in, and it's not going to run off. So they're not actually considered impervious surface. And there was actually, for the turbine pads themselves, there was no requirement for revegetation. So, those areas may remain stone
Themselves, okay.
in this
Thank you.
instance.
That's helpful.
And that's,
That's
that's
helpful.
part of what was allowed. And I think that the revegetation plan for the fill slopes, those steep slopes on the downhill side, was driven by, the whole idea of narrowing the strip that was cleared and minimizing the sort of interruption of wildlife movement. And obviously, there's a visibility aspect to that too, by having those areas go from gray to green.
Go ahead.
What's the dimension of that pad?
The turbine
And how-
pad?
Yeah, and how deep does it go?
The pads are 2 or 3 acres generally.
No, they're 190 feet by 200, so
Okay.
they're
At the top?
the working surface is 190 by 200.
Yeah,
So we
so
can
it's
fit the
less than
pieces
an
on.
acre.
That's 40,000 square feet, just under an acre apiece.
Yeah, and then I guess I'm thinking more when you look at the bottom.
Yeah, it
footprint,
depends.
Because
Some
of
of
the
them-
fill slopes, it's bigger, but a lot of those
Well,
areas go away.
That's what I'm asking, is how big the base is.
Everyone's different.
So there's turbine pad 9, which is the photograph you all refer to. So that one in particular, the base is probably, I don't know, maybe it's another, 60 feet out,
Yeah,
probably,
Yeah.
at the
yeah,
base?
Yeah.
Because it's something like that.
That's probably, I would guess, 3
That's the-
acres.
Yeah, that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
There are other ones that are, like turbine pad 1 is basically 190 by 200 because it's where it
At
went in
grade.
was basically at grade the whole area.
Yeah.
So they vary in size depending on where they are. And turbine pad 9, which I think I can show you, is the one that you've seen the photograph of. They were flying the plane by to take that photo. And we'll go up and take a look at
And
that.
you're saying that the slope that goes down could be revegetated?
It is.
that-
It is, I mean, those fill slopes are all required to be spread with these materials, the grubbings and topsoil that was saved, and those are subject to the post-construction revegetation monitoring plan that was agreed upon between GMP and A&R. And so those areas, and obviously it hasn't happened fully yet because the project was still being constructed.
But would that cause that pad to weaken by roots growing in there and expanding and water getting in there, expanding and freezing?
Well, I'm not the structural guy, but I don't know, Charlie, if you want to.
So the pad is built as a working surface. It doesn't actually support the turbine. The turbine itself is on a 24-foot diameter concrete cap,
Okay.
which is basically set into onto the bedrock of the mountain. And then there's 20 rock bolts around the perimeter that are drilled down. That holds the turbine, this concrete cap, against the top of the mountain. So it's not a traditional foundation where the turbines are resting on it as a weight bearing. The concrete cap is transferring the force of the turbine through the concrete into the rock bolts that are in the bed.
So what's the purpose of that pad then?
It's you have to have an area to lay everything down to put it together. So
Okay.
your blades, you can see there's a broken one that we broke during construction out there. It's 189 feet
So there's
long.
no rebar or anything
Oh,
in that
no,
pad?
it's just rock fill. It's
Okay.
just rock spread out with a dozer and compacted. So
Okay.
there may
Okay.
be some at the edges, some weakening because of stuff growing in, but it's not going to affect the overall structural integrity of the slope.
Okay. I understand that a lot better now.
Yep.
I just want to ask you, when we came down today, when Ann and I, turns out to come down 100, like the first 3 turbines on the north end weren't operating. I mean, are they now? Is there a reason?
I'm not sure, Vince,
No, they weren't moving.
what's on,
And then there was another one who wasn't. I was just curious.
there's a couple that are out for maintenance. I know they have 2 out for maintenance.
That's okay.
The first 2 on the lake are curtailed.
Oh, they're curtailed right now?
Shut down.
Okay.
We got the 2 are being serviced right now.
So we have 4 that are off right now?
I
So that-
counted 4.
So that's the slide that Charlie will show you now. It's of the 21 turbines. It's
Yeah.
real time exactly what's happening with each one. Shut down, not shut down, if not shut
Okay,
down, how
that's
much
what
energy.
that was my question.
Yeah.
How much are you producing?
Yeah, and also,
Yeah.
we also can tell you what our curtailment is for the day, or at least for this hour.
The turbines, here's turbine 1, just
Yeah.
the northeast corner of the project, down to turbine 21 on the bottom. This is the Vestas VOB system that they use to manage the park. I have this on my laptop, and then they have it here in the building, and we have it back in Colchester in our control center. And this is, I'm not allowed to do anything, but I'm allowed to look at it.
Who is allowed to?
You're just the boss.
These guys here, certain people have permission, and then Colchester, where our operations center is, they can control the turbines from there.
But they won't let you do it?
No.
Okay.
No. Let me look. So right now, it appears turbine 1 is it's in derated mode for something, I'm not exactly sure. So these first 3 are
Grid breaker or something.
for the grid breaker?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what, I don't necessarily know what that means. These first 3 are curtailed, they're not running right now, they're in pause, they're yellow.
That was only 2 unless you changed it.
No, it just came back. No, as I say,
Oh, you couldn't change it.
so that one just came back. So then this one, what's
Guy
this
up there.
one?
Yeah, that one was,
This is 7.
that was sort of stopped too when we drove down.
It's not giving me info.
Oh, well, that's all right.
And then this one, I think they're doing the annual maintenance on right now.
Yeah, that's what he said.
That's what's number 9. So that one's doing, that's good, because we'll stop up there on the pad and see that. So this is just some information. I'm gonna pull up a couple of other little screens so we can just see some things. Come off a split screen, let's see what this is. So there's 3 little screens I'll bring up real quick. So this far left one, there it is. So this one is just a sort of quick summary of the project. Right now, we're putting out just under 15 megawatts of power. The wind's blowing 15 meters a second. It's out of the northwest. It's -2 degrees Celsius up on top. These are averages, so this is at the nacelle height of the turbines. This screen over here on the right, this shows you what we have running. We're putting out around 15 megawatts. It just bumped up, so the wind must have picked up a little bit. We're currently curtailed, it looks like, to 15 megawatts, and unfortunately, we could be putting out 55 megawatts right now because of the wind on top.
So why aren't you then?
Why aren't we?
Yeah,
ISO New England has told us this is all they need on the grid right now from our plant.
So this is my problem,
Mm-hmm.
or it's my concern. So we build this facility.
Yep.
Or you build this facility and whatever, and now we've got it. So right now, we've got 55 to 15. We've
Yeah,
got 40 megawatts
of available power.
of available power that we're not using.
Correct.
Right.
What can we do? Is there anything that we can do
Yes.
to, is this the storage thing,
Yeah, so
Robert, or
we-
something?
so-
What can we do to capture that? If we're gonna put it up, let's get all we can get.
Right, and this is the frustrating part.
Right.
So this is where that, you may have heard about the synchronous condenser.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So once we get that installed, then this pretty much goes away.
Okay.
The amount of curtailment, there may still be curtailment because every plant at some point gets curtailed, but we won't have the kind of curtailment that we're seeing now. That synchronous condenser, we expect to have it, it'll be up before the end of the year, if all goes well.
Yeah, November sometimes,
And the reason for the synchronous condenser only came to light last year. Initially, ISO New England said that we were good to go. We did our feasibility study. They said we were good to go. We did the system impact study, and all along that process, it was a green light. Towards the very end, when it came to sign off on that, something changed, rules changed,
Yeah.
something changed, and they said, you know, for reliability reasons, in the event of something happening, we need to have you install this piece of equipment to make sure that we keep the voltage where it needs to be, given potential for certain things to happen. That's the best I can do in terms of explaining this thing. And the fact is, you know, it's this minus one kind of contingency plan in the event of, so we need to, they told us, we actually didn't agree with them, we fought back, we lost when we went to the FERC, and we were able to negotiate a slightly less expensive fix. So rather than an $18 million fix, it wound up being a $10.8 million fix. And that's what we're working on.
But it'll
now.
be fixed, and then you'll be doing 55 megawatts, if
right.
it's possible to do
Right.
55 megawatts.
You will.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never heard of a wind farm doing 100% of the
No, well, it's
rated.
63 megawatts.
Oh,
It's rated at 63.
Oh,
I've never
no,
heard of one over 40%.
No, well, no, you're talking about, no, we can do 63 megawatts. We can hit full capacity. If the wind is the right speed, then we can be putting it at
But you lose it
100%.
out, you lose
Now,
it.
it doesn't do it all the time. It doesn't do it all the time.
Through a year, what do you think you'll
That's
average?
different,
when
that's
you're-
different, that's capacity factor. So there will be days when the wind's here, we're putting out 100% of our power. So today,
There will be.
if the, you're sure, right now it's showing 58 megawatts is what I'd be putting out if ISO wasn't curtailing us. 2 weekends ago, I think we were running right around 60 megawatts of output. So we've been up there where we've been putting out full, where it was bitter cold, and they were looking for extra energy. So we were able to do that. The capacity factor you're talking about is how much energy we put out. So capacity factor is if we were to run at 100% output,
For the whole year.
8,760 hours for the year,
Right.
then we would have a 100% capacity factor.
The highest I ever saw was in Kansas, and that was 40%.
Yeah, so VY is probably in the high 90s for their capacity factor, because they run most of the time. The new plants do. They tend to run the very high percentages of outputs. They have in the
Where's
high-
that one located?
Vermont Yankee.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was talking about wind towers.
I'm trying to explain capacity factor.
Oh, okay.
So,
Excuse me, I lost that.
So VY has a very high capacity factor, just like a natural gas plant in Boston, or whatever. Our forecasted capacity factor for here, I think it's around 33 and a half, somewhere in there, for what we expect. So it's the equivalent if we ran a third of the year at full output. Now, we won't run at full output all the time.
Because we don't have the wind.
Because you don't have the wind all the time, right. So we'll put out energy. Our Searsburg facility makes energy 80% of the time. 80% of the time it's making more energy and putting it onto the grid than what it takes to run it. So we expect to do the same with this. Now, it may only be a half a megawatt or a megawatt that's going out, and sometimes it's a small
Well,
amount.
it's
'cause
producing 80% of the time.
It's producing
But at
energy.
the end of the year, you'll produce 1/3 of the rated power, 33%.
That's correct.
So when we think about, when we hear the advertisements of these things going up and their total megawatt capacity and how many homes they'll provide, is that at 100% capacity?
No, no. So when we talk about Kingdom putting out enough energy for 24,000 homes.
That's at a third, at 33%.
It's the megawatt hours. So the number of megawatt hours that those homes would consume during the year, that's how much energy we put out.
At
Correct.
1/3.
Yeah,
At
for 1/3 of the
33%.
capacity.
At 33%
At your capacity factor.
Yes, not, yes. the-
At your capacity
That's
factor.
correct.
Right, that's what I said.
Thank you.
Yep, and our, you know, our hydro facilities run in the mid-30s for a percent capacity factor as well, so it's similar, you know, and solar's down somewhere in the 12%, 10%, something like that.
17.
Well,
17,
okay.
if you get
Trackers.
With trackers, you might be
Really?
17.
That's what we
Yeah,
did.
yeah, that's what.
You might,
so-
I want to put it in context.
Trackers, yeah, because
Yeah.
they're not stable, they're moving.
right, trackers add about 40%
Yeah.
to the capacity
Yeah.
factor.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're running the 10 to 12, somewhere
Yeah.
in there. So,
okay.
This is what we
thanks.
saw in Munster, the same basic type of output, frankly. Very similar.
yeah, no, I'm sure they're all.
I have a question on that $10 million addition.
Yep.
Who carries that cost load? Is that passed on to the ratepayer?
Yes, so this is about being a utility-owned generation. In the end, it's our customers who pay for the entire project. They also the ones who benefit from the investment. So the cost of this power, Kingdom Community Wind, is going to be between 9 and 10 cents a kilowatt hour. We're looking closer to 9 cents and 10 cents, but that's the range, that's what we expect it to cost. That's a lot less than what we originally thought it was going to cost when we first started construction. A couple of reasons for that. One, you know, just being really careful with the dollars, but two, the turbines that we ultimately decided on were 20% more efficient than the technologies we were looking at when we first started this process, improvements in technology. As a result of that, we're getting 20% more power, potentially 20% more power out of these. And that actually helps bring down the cost per kilowatt hour. So even with a $10.8 million additional cost, we're still well below what we originally estimated and still within that 9 to 10%.
Now, there was also a blade change. Wasn't there a cost involved in a blade change also?
The one out here, as part of the construction, I bet you that was probably Vestas. Who was responsible?
I mean, a different size blade. You started off with a smaller blade and then.
All right, well,
That was part of what we, that was the primary reason we were able to put out more energy. So we originally were looking at Vestas V90, 3 megawatt turbines, so they had a 90-meter rotor on them. The V112 became available, which is a 112-meter rotor, so you have, the swept area is dramatically larger on the V112 than it is the V90, so you gain a tremendous amount of energy in the low wind areas. So we were borderline for the V90 being the right turbine for this site, and when the V112 came out, it was clear that that was a better solution for us, so we ended up going with that, and that was a bigger turbine blade. It's a whole different turbine.
What was the additional cost on that?
The delta in price, I want to say the turbines probably cost us, I don't know, it wasn't even a 10% bump to go to the bigger turbines, but you picked up considerably more energy. And the whole thing is about dividing the amount of cost of it by the maximum number of megawatt hours, so you can get your levelized cost as low as possible. So the delta, when we did the analysis with the V90, the V112, we also looked at the Siemens and GE turbine, and the Vestas proved to be the most cost-effective turbine for this site based on the wind profile and what the cost of installation and construction would be.
So Robert, I just got to go back to the 9 to 10 cents, because of course that's so much better than standard offers. Right? And, you know, for solar and stuff. So what's it costing at Searsburg? Because you own that too.
we're down to 6 cents in Searsburg. And that's because we've had an operation for over 12 years, so we're able to pay down the capital. And again, it being a utility project, it's our customers who pay for it, but it's also them who benefit from it. So a good example are all our hydro units, which we've owned for almost a century.
Yeah.
So that power is anywhere from 1 cent to 4 cents a kilowatt hour, pretty much for our hydro dams.
And
So-
how long will it take you to buy down the capital on this? So when you say 9 to 10.
So that's for
how long?
25 years.
25?
25 years. That's a levelized cost. Now, the truth is, paying down capital, you pay more in the beginning than you do later on. And then the production tax credit also comes into play the first 10 years. So you see, like year one, it's at 12 cents. I'm guessing it's around 11, 12 cents year one. By year 10, it's down to, I'm guessing, I think it's like 2 cents, because I just remember this chart. And then year 10, there's a bump up because the production tax credit goes away, but it doesn't bump up to where it was originally, and then it starts going down again. And then it just levelizes off, and once where it levelizes, it's just what it costs us for taxes and for maintenance. And that's what our customers pay.
And the life of these turbines, or is about how long?
25-year life of the turbines, but, we'll be obviously, in 25 years assessing, each one individually and retrofitting and trying to keep the plant alive as we plan to do at Searsburg.
But if it bumps up, then that will become your real cost without the production tax credit.
Right, and so we're starting here, kind of goes like this.
Production tax credit for us flows directly to the customers. We don't, it doesn't benefit us in any way. We have
I was just trying to understand what your real production costs are without the artificial supports of production.
Well, it's not really
tax credits and
artificial
things like
support. It's just the way, it's not an artificial support, it's the way the US government set up.
What do you think it would bump up to?
It's about 2.2 cents kilowatt hour.
So our customers will be paying 2.2 cents more per kilowatt hour now for production tax credit. So rather than having a levelized cost of 9.3 cents, you know, you'd add 2.2 cents to that, and that would be what customers would be paying.
Yeah. Of course, that's a much longer conversation for another day and time, but, you know, we could have the conversation of, you know, how much oil plants get subsidized and gas plants, they all do.
But for me, it's the conversation, and maybe this isn't within our purview either, but if you're paying 9 or 10 cents, you know, a kilowatt hour for a plant that's owned by a utility in Vermont versus a project that is then sold back and you're, you know, and you're paying a standard offer, you know, price.
Well, again, the value of having it be utility owned is that at the end of the time it's paid off, you know, really the customers own it. We're not back negotiating with the developer because we are the developer for whatever the market price is. Customers will just pay whatever it costs us to run the plant. That's the beauty of utility owned. And with standard offer, you know, they'll have a contract for 10 or 20 years, at the end of which
We have to go back again.
we have to
Yeah, we
So
may
what's-
have to rebuild again in 20 to 25 years.
Well, new technologies, small technologies, yeah, more, yeah, so let's hope.
So we heard from, well, and maybe this isn't for another day, but, you know, at the most recent meeting when we heard from Waterbury and Duxbury and, you know, and communities that are, you know, trying to get out in front, thinking about their, you know, energy needs. So are you out there trying to do some partnerships with communities?
Oh, absolutely, and, you know, well, Rutland is an
I was gonna say,
example, our
it's
solar
amazing
city.
Rutland hasn't come up yet.
I mean, the future of electricity in this state, we believe, and we want to be a leader, and that is distributed generation. How do we get more small-scale systems available throughout the month? I mean, there are benefits on many levels. And we want to do it in the most cost-effective way, and that's always a challenge, because renewables are still more expensive for the most part, except for large-scale, you know, wind, which actually is more in line with the market. Particularly with the fact that we can sell RECs. I'm surprised that didn't come up either.
Well, no, it's come up. We had conversations about RECs last week.
Yeah, I know.
This is exciting.
No, it is, right. But how do we encourage
Good
siting?
reminder.
But,
And that's my point. How do we encourage siting? How do we encourage them to go out and join with communities to site projects?
Well, the beauty is that with the sale of the RECs, so we're selling RECs at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. You heard what the levelized cost is, right? So really, the cost to our customers, yeah, that just goes to customers. So that sale of those RECs benefits our customers. Once we sell the RECs, of course, someone else gets to own the attributes. But the fact is, we built a wind farm in Vermont, and because of the benefits of being able to sell those RECs and bring the cost down. So our customers benefit from having this plant in many ways. But they also benefit from having really power that's closer to what we pay for Hydro-Quebec and even Vermont Yankee, if we were still getting power from Vermont Yankee.
Hydro-Quebec 4 cents?
5 to 6 cents.
Any other questions?
So to the cat thing.
Sounds like a bad.
This one's offline, we're tailed right now. It's getting, it looks like it might be getting So I forget who was asking, you were asking about the rock anchors or the foundation?
Yes,
Concrete pad there, those are the rock anchors around the perimeter. About 5 feet thick concrete pad. There's 40 tons of reinforcing steel inside that pad. And then there's 120 bolts to hold the tower down, 60 on the inside and 60 on the outside.
How deep does it go?
The pad itself is 5 feet thick of concrete, and the bolts are
No, I mean how deep
45 feet long each bolt.
How deep into the ground does it go?
Bolts are 45
45 feet.
45 feet.
The
I'm
bolts
sorry,
are
I
45 feet from there,
Got it.
so plus or minus. Each site's slightly different because they did a geotech boring for each one.
Yeah.
to come up with it.
Yeah.
But the concrete itself is just 5 feet thick.
didn't- Yeah, but you know something, I was concerned about the pad, and I'm glad to hear that the pad isn't reinforced concrete, because that's what it appears to be. Like you said, it appears to be something that it's not.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
He's gonna head up to probably over to where do we want to go next? Maybe to 12. You can see the whole south end. Yeah, it is too bad, but. Okay. They haven't put the ladder rack on yet, huh? Concrete pad to the mountain are in the 45-foot length.
45 feet?
45 feet in length. Yep. So the outside of the circle, you see a big, heavy black piece on cover. That's the rock bolt. It's a 2.5-inch diameter steel bolt, and they drill a 6-inch hole, put it down in, they grout it, and then pull it tight with a machine to about 550,000 pounds of pressure on that bolt. They extend it and they snug the bolt down, and that's what holds it to the mountain.